So that's on now. And so, Craig, thank you very much for doing this call. Why don't we get started, and others may join, and if not, we'll have it recorded. We'll be able to send it out, which is great. So first of all, thank you for your time, and I want to welcome everyone, to this call. We wanted to have a chance to hear from somebody who's been through this a few times to give us their update on how you think about it, Craig, and some of the actions you've taken, and some of the things that history has taught you over time, which would be very helpful. I just want to remind everyone that we are recording this for purposes of being able to share it on our Envisions newsletter, and that we recommend strongly that you get working on your SBA filings for the new programs the federal government has set up. And we've helped a number of you connect through to Citizens Bank, but we need to do that sooner rather than later. So if you have not had a chance to do that, please reach out to us and we'll get you connected. I think we've got about 2/3 of the portfolio companies set up now. So we're in very good shape there. Forms should be done hopefully by, if not the end of this week, then early next week. And then the process will begin from there. So quite a remarkable time, but as I've learned from lots of years of history, this too will pass. So Craig, why don't we get started with a little bit of background information for the group on your background and a little bit of information about Kingfield.
Sure. So first of all, hello to everybody. I know some of you from the dinner party at the last meeting, and hope everybody is safe and your family safe also. So actually, that's the most important thing. So
yeah, it is the most important thing.
Everybody is safe and healthy. And everybody's got a story or knows somebody that knows somebody. So everybody's gets it. So my background is just to sort of put myself relative date-wise. So graduated from Colby College in 1988. Went from there to Wall Street, was a trader at Salomon Brothers for a couple of years, then went to Fidelity for a couple of years. Then started a company called Evair, which is a investment accounting company, portfolio software company for small and large governments. That was sold to SS&C Camera. Then I started another company in 2005 called Acadia Soft, and it's become pretty much the go-to for financial services for collateral movements. Last year, it did about $150 trillion of transactions.
It's incredible.
And in talking to the CEO, who's a friend of mine who used to be my COO, they've already done that volume now. So
wow.
They've already done over 150 trillion of collateral transactions so far.
That is incredible. And systems have held up well, and they've been able to get through all that.
Knock on wood, they've not had any problems, and their financial model is transaction generated.
Oh,
so
perfect.
It's a happy model.
Yeah.
Current company is called Kingfield. I think it looks like my partner, John Rodefeld, is on this also, that John and I started it in, give or take, 3 years ago, about 2.5, 3 years ago. John's background is he ran operations for much of Barclays Bank. Mm-hmm. And part of that, he had a lot of senior positions at Salomon Brothers also. And from a company point of view, we're pre-revenue, we're getting set to, outside of the virus, we were planning to start going live next month. Looks like that'll get pushed out by give or take a month, which is not bad in this context. We're based
sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say we're based in New York.
Although you're calling in from
Naples, Florida.
There we go. So you went to work from home before anybody else did. You were a trendsetter.
John and I looked at it, and I've gone back and looked, and it was March 4th that the guy, if any of you follow the New York information, the guy from New Rochelle that came into Grand Central got sick, and his office was across from Grand Central. We're in the Chrysler building. John and I looked at that, spoke to Mark, spoke to a couple of our other VCs, and very quickly said, we're gone. So that was March 4th or 5th that we did that.
No, that was good. Very, very timely on your part. So I'm curious if you have noticed any difference in your clients. You mentioned that it feels like a month delay at the moment, but anything else you've learned in watching your clients deal with this crisis and how that impacts, you think, Kingfield?
I mean, everybody is hurting in some form or another in the banking business. The companies like Acadia Soft that are cashing in on this because it's benefiting from the volume, those are probably few and far between. Most of the banks are having anywhere from a difficult time to a very difficult time, because what's been in vogue for the past umpteen years is ship everything off to India. And what people in the financial crisis realized is that when things went off to India, they lost control, and they just lost control. And so between the financial crisis and now, based on those lessons, what did they do? They sent more off to India. And there's not a concept of working from home in India.
Right.
So they've had a lot of problems. We spoke to the COO of one of the giant banks yesterday. And what we were told is that 80–90% of what's going on is going along reasonably okay. People with laptops, people with the ability to get work done. The problem is that 10 or 20% of the people that have to do things because processes are still manual, or processes are tied to something that's tied to something, and they can't easily do it from home. And that's the 10 to 20% that's really getting messed around. And so from our point of view, from a long-term business point of view, that's what we've been focused on anyways. So if we've got the patience, which we do, then in theory, we should do okay in a bit.
Yeah, it seemed to me you'd be a real solution as they sort of now experimented on a grand scale with how to break a system. Yeah, now that they know those new breaks, you should be able to be incredibly helpful to them, I would think.
I mean, what my partner John has said a number of times, and the banks always were they understood it, but it was theoretical. And John, having run operations for Barclays, he's like, it's a control issue and it's a risk issue. And when all you're being told is to cut cost and cut heads, it's a problem for another day. The other day is here.
Right. This is it. Very true. So you've had experiences, you mentioned, in two other companies before Kingfield, and you've experienced downturns in those before. So what has that experience taught you in terms of how to deal with a downturn?
Sure. So the first company, Iver, we lived through 9/11. I was literally on the phone with my customer from First Union, who had called me up that morning and was telling me how excited he was because that day was the opening day of First Union Bank's new office in the World Trade Center.
Oh, how awful.
And he wasn't there, thank God, but the people were. And so that was Iver. Then with Acadia Soft, we were there in 2008. And for those of you that have been to London and Canary Wharf, that long escalator that goes from the tube up to the main plaza, it was just silent. It was the Monday after Lehman had gone bankrupt, and you just go up and it's just like everybody's looking. And when you got to the top, you saw all kinds of people sobbing, walking around with Iron Mountain boxes, leaving the Lehman building, which is now JP building. So it's sort of been here before. So I was trying to think of how, when I think about this, as well as how in talking with John and then our CTO, Jamie Bernard, and he had a company in 2008 that had been flying high. And then when all the banks started contracting, his customers literally went in half because B of A and Merrill Lynch were both customers. Then
there they are, all as one.
And so the first thing that I like in terms of how to articulate how I think about this, the first thing is probably not is to capitulate. And what I mean by capitulate is you can't change this. You can't change the reality that you're now
Right.
in. So don't try.
To accept the new reality no matter what. That's so hard.
Accept it. Because like in my first company, it was like, no, we're going to keep doing this. We're going to, and aside from being insensitive to our customers,
right,
because they were having problems too. It's like, we're going to do this. We're going to do this. And it just didn't work. And it probably cost us a lot more than it could have if we've just said, okay, sort of like on March 4th or 5th, just looking at the reality, just going, we're done, go home.
Right.
And so that's number one. Number two is once you figure that out, is to pivot and essentially say, okay, our customers are going to have problems. They're going to be worried about themselves. They're going to be worried about their kids, about their 87-year-old grandmother and grandfather.
Right.
They all have the same things. And so they're also trying to figure out how to do their job. But if you pivot and you say, okay, I'm going to change what success is defined by. And so like we've done that internally. We've done it with Mark and a couple of our other VCs. If you try to stay to the exact same criteria of success, you're probably going to fail.
Well, you're not measuring the risk the right way, right? You end up probably, thinking you can get it done at X price, if you will, or X burn, and you really can't. And so you're better to recognize that up front and deal with it. Yeah.
And if you do it, then you can say, okay, then when you start to go through this, then you can show that you're stringing together successes rather than just perpetually failing.
Yeah, that is a good difference. That's for sure.
Then the other thing is shore up your finances aggressively. So we had enough money to make it through to January of next year. That's what we had planned on. And so then all of a sudden when it started, John and I were talking to each other and we're like, okay, we need to move the timeline out. And then when we were talking to Mark and one of the other VCs, the suggested time became very long, as in 21 months. And at first we were like, okay. But then the more we thought about it, we figured out a different plan to do it, which also involved raising more money than we had intended to. So essentially, the larger shareholders for the company agreed to take more of a dilution than we had intended to a month ago. But in the long run, it's probably cheaper. So we shored up our finances, and then in terms of executing on the plan, this is much more what John is doing from point of view of figuring out what our rollout is, but it's keep the plan simple, the new plan, keep it simple, do things that you can succeed at, and do things that the customers will say, oh, that helps me, rather than saying, oh, I have to deal with these people again. It's like help them. That it sounds simple, but it's actually pretty hard to keep it simple.
Right, because you're tempted to keep on the path you were on, as you were saying, and instead of thinking you've got this new issue, like trying to figure out how to deal with India on certain processes, how could we help, because we're sort of in that lane already. And then there's always that empathy part of it, right? As you say, everyone's going through this on a personal level and a professional level, and these are moments where all those come together. And the more you can get connected, the better off you are. So a little feedback there. There were some specific things you did on the cost side that, I don't want to go into details of individuals and things, but there's sort of two or three things that I was impressed with that you and John and the team worked on pretty quickly to say, here's how we can save money. So if pivoting on the revenue side and thinking about, clients and empathy for what they need, worked on that side of it. On the cost side, you did some really smart things and have done them pretty quickly. And maybe it would just help the group to know kind of a laundry list of those.
Sure. So the first thing that we did was no new hires, just flat out no new hires. And then the second thing was not let go, but stop the contracts for contractors.
Yep.
So this is all a game of attrition. Then the next thing that we did, we went through, we were up to, I think, scenario I of different financial models, trying to figure out which would work, which wouldn't. And what we ended up doing is we concluded that not only the frontline people, in other words, our developers and the people that deal with the banks, were feeling pain, and they probably had more pain on a relative scale because most of them are younger than us, so they have younger families and
Right.
so on. But also in New York City, people have already tried to come in and poach our better programmers. Because that's what happens. So we decided we weren't going to cut any of them. And so the probably the biggest cash thing is that what we did is 5 or 6 of us decided to defer our salaries. So we agreed to defer 25% of our salaries. And at first, not Mark, one of our investors said, great idea, we'll give everybody stock. And we're like, absolutely not, because the bulk of the people, we've already got stock.
Right.
And it's sort of
most expensive gifts you could give that way. It's right. And
right.
Not good for the company.
It's sort of like we're deluding ourselves to give ourselves. And but then also it's for the people other than John and myself, saying, here's stock based on what I lived through in my first company with 9/11, where that was sort of the .com to .bomb world.
Yeah.
In times like this, the value of the stock seems to go down in the eyes of many people, even if it's not.
Right.
Coupled with just in the past month, you have, for simple terms, SoftBank unraveling. So the whole Uber, Grubhub, WeWorks debacles. So we just said, no, it needs to be cash. And then from a cash point of view, when we have a happy event, be it a higher valuation financing or revenue starts coming in, then pay the cash back at 110%.
Right.
So that if some of the people have to do home equity lines or whatever, then they feel like they're getting it back. So that's another thing that we did. And then
I thought that was a really elegant solution of saying, you're willing to take the pain now, which is great of all of you to do. And then in fairness, right, we should restore that at a later date. I thought that was really smartly designed.
And so consequently, what we've now done is, with the larger financing, what we've done is we've gone from having a January 2021 turn into a pumpkin budget, which is what we had planned, and to having a September, October run out of money 2021. That's a huge difference. And so when you can tell everybody that we're good for a year and a half, that based on what I lived through with 9/11 and what I lived through for 2008, that's the best thing that you can do, is tell all of your employees, we've taken the hit and we're good for this time period.
No, that's great. That was all very good actions, and again, immediately bought you time. And you combine, we had an open seed 1 round or bridge round that we were doing, and we were able to, as you say, pony up a bit more and get the round closed, and that's great. And you're set up for success. So because of the experience you've had, I just would like to close my questions on, what gives you hope in moments like this? How do you see through to the other side and feel good about, what likely the next part looks like?
If you had a good business plan before this happened, then you probably have a good business plan, as opposed to if you had sort of a hokey plan that was like you had some trick that was going to make money, but whatever. And I'm sure Vestigo wouldn't invest in a company like that.
Well, we tried to avoid those, yeah.
The reality is that, again, this may be dating myself, but each of the other 2 times, 9/11, 2008, looking at my list, everybody said the world was going to come to an end.
Yeah, they sure did.
Everybody said that the dollar was no longer going to be the reserve currency.
Yep.
Everybody said China was going to take over the world, and we were all going to be little pawns of the Chinese economy. everybody said this was going to blow up. Everybody said the middle class was going to blow up and non-existent. Been through this twice, and it hasn't happened.
Right.
So it just and that's not to say that it can't happen, but it's sort of like if you just keep stuff simple and plan, switch what success means in agreement with your investors, but switch what success means so that therefore you can string together wins rather than string together losses. Even if it's a different financial plan, it seems to do pretty well. Every decade, in my experience, every decade, we've had one of these blowups, and then after the blowup recalibrates, people come out better. I was talking to a friend of mine who's the head of software development for arguably the premier hospital in Boston and maybe the world. And what he was telling me is how in real time, everything is changing so fast that within another 6 months after this is over, that the entire medical process is going to be entirely different.
Yeah, so much will get automated, and they'll learn from telemedicine. I mean, it really will be remarkable, won't it?
Right.
Yeah, same is true here. Well, that's great, Craig. I really appreciate your insights and your experience. I'm sure the rest of the group does too. Why don't we open it up for questions from the group and see what things may be on other people's minds. So I think the best way is if you just unmute and ask your question, that'll work.